Hi guys, welcome back. I wanted to just show you something as an offshoot to this conversion project that I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks. You've seen the highlighting stuff before. Why am I showing you this again? Well, at some point we're going to have to replace the IDE and replace the phraser. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if we want to keep this kind of concept that that PlayBASIC is easy for beginners to understand, it's going to have to have certain modern traits without going crazy. So here I'm just trying to mimic some of the behaviors in the IDE. So we've got the current IDE, so we've got hover ability, so we can detect when the mouse is over something. We can do a scroll. You might notice that functions now have an area where the background color can be changed, so I can detect when we're inside this block of code. I'll put a little highlight down the side as well, and I've implemented a collapse. Interesting, isn't it? I've had a few other things too, but really what I want to get at really is just that after we get this conversion thing done, and I'll have to do the GUI of this probably over the next week, I guess, or the weekend. Got stuck up with some other projects last week of the 3D aligned thing up and running. And we've had server problems the last 10 days, so trying to upload things or do anything on the website's been just incredibly frustrating. Upcoming project list pretty much is build a new version of the website, do some sort of Lexa, and use the Lexa maybe to either build the back end for an IDE, so it can do all the tokenization, the editing aspect, and we just have a set of high-level functions to do things like add a character or change things or cut and paste a section from it. That sort of stuff, add queries. As a bit of a joke, you can toggle comments on and off, and you can do the live refactoring here, but there's nothing here that actually understands. Of course, at the moment we're looking at the translated Blitz code rather than PB dedicated code. Any Lexa would handle PB code, just so we're on the same path. This method is much easier to implement some of this stuff than what the previous IDE attempt I had a number of years ago, probably 10 years ago now. And that was spawned, out of a sort of gnawing question I had about would it be possible to write a custom display and editor in Visual Basic 6? And the answer was yeah, it is, but you still have some problems with that. With this, my goal is that we have an edit control that doesn't have a display element to it. So it does all the document. The library will do the manhandling of the document. You're loading your text. It'll Lex the document. Still the thing as this similar idea as what we're doing here is pretty much a linked list of these cells. And that allows things to be inserted, deleted, remapped, all kinds of stuff really. Things that just weren't possible with the way the old one worked. Well, they were possible, but they were really clumsy. Here it's still difficult to do them, but nowhere near the same level of complexity. The things that I would be interested in implementing is everything that we have here. So it would be type aware. At the moment, there's no character editing in this at all. I'm just sort of experimenting with the display process. So even if the process was just used in a debugger, so we have the debugger application be written in PlayBASIC, for example, and the two things communicate, the current running app and the debugger communicate with each other via like a local network or whatever. That would be fantastic. That would mean we could reuse the same code, and because it's written in PlayBASIC, you guys can make modifications, implement stuff into it as well. If we're going to try and make it attractive to people who are beginners to programming, or people who are indies, we want to make sure that our tool set is comparable to other tools, but it isn't that overwhelming that it will scare people away. And unfortunately, when you look at some of the really mature, very elaborate editing solutions now, like IDE solutions, they are terrifying to people. Well, I want this thing to work, to be specifically for PlayBASIC, and to understand the traits of PlayBASIC. If that means we have to modify the lexer in between things, and so be it. The other part of the conversation is this same lexing principle. I want to use that in PlayBASIC as well, and that'll open up. I want to get rid of the original pass one of the compiler, which is the compiler is kind of two phases. So there's pass one, which is like a skimming through the code looking for declarations of certain things like functions, namely, and labels. And then the second pass is where it actually starts to build code. That allows you to, because pass one skims through and sees all the function names, when it encounters that name at some other point, like for here, here's an example there. So I've got this BBSAR function is used here, but declared down here. So the only way PB could work out if this exists or not at this time, the only way PB could understand this is that we uncover the functions we're using in the initial pre-pass, and then as we go through, then we flesh them all out. But that just means that when we get to here, we could go, yep, this is a function, it has this particular parameter set and returns this data for us. And that's also why in this example I've left the return function here. So if you have a return value, you can see what's going on here. In terms of an IDE, you'd have to keep a second piece of data that tags what the collapsed state of any function on screen, which is something our current IDE doesn't do, and nor does my remake either. And even the one Danny wrote, which is before the one you're familiar with, that was way back, like 2002 or something, 2003 or something, maybe 2004. I'm not quite sure. But that was a long time ago. The lexer in this particular version, can be tricked and fooled, and that's why we have some of the problems we do have with it. That's why I'm keen to write it from the same perspective what the actual compiler lexer works. So the two things match. We should get the same behavior between one and the other. If there's a weird bug in the lexer and the IDE, then that'll happen in the compiler as well, unfortunately. So just wanted to show that running and give you a heads up about what's on my mind concerning that. So pretty much in our next projects pretty much are going to be having some sort of website replacement, at least doing the lexer project, and then trying to doing some research on that to see how viable that is. This example here, on my laptop, it'll clock at 200 frames per second rendering a document with no optimization, and that's what you want. If I run it again, it's sort of a bit kludgy because we're capturing the whole thing. But the way this works at the moment is it's rendering everything. This entire document's being rendered every time we call a refresh. In a real editing environment, we wouldn't do that. We would just, if the cursor was on this line here, that's the line where I would be updating. And if we have to display anything over the top, like one idea I was having before is that you could reveal the local variables for this particular function, or or have any secondary data that's been picked up during the it's skimming through the document, like the variables or any constants or whatever belongs to this code here. We could treat that as a local thing. And it's not that difficult to do. The Fraser does this anyway. The Lexa does this already. It runs through and classifies everything as the handful of types that are available. And by types, I mean is this bit of text a keyword? Is it a user-defined function? Is it an array name? Is it a variable? Is it a type name? And that's pretty much the scope of what you need. But you still have to store this data, search for it, etc. It's not doing all that every time we have a refresh here. That's not how the IDE would work, or the editor would work. It would load the document in, do what's done here, compute a tokenized view of the whole thing. Then as we edit it, then we can edit it token by token, which is trivial to do. There would be some complexities in it, of course. There was always going to be something that's awkward to do, but that model's much better, and it means you could link any pair or cell or group of these tokens that you wanted to link together. So all those features you see in modern IDEs which have collapsible if statements and for loops and stuff like that, or you could have you could right click and insert a particular kind of block of code if you wanted to add have a framework inserted for you. I'm not saying it would be the best thing since sliced bread, but that's the kind of stuff that's missing at the moment. Like autocomplete is missing. We do have autocomplete in the IDE, but we need a more modern version. So if you enter a type name or have any kind of field reference, it can just prompt you with what fields this thing has and let you select from them. It gets through a lot of typo problems, where you're rushing through typing something out and you type the field name incorrectly or whatever. It doesn't get picked up until you hit compile. Alright, that'll do us. This is pretty brief. Hopefully that gives you something to chew on, get excited about. Worst case scenario is that we could have an IDE that's written in PlayBASIC itself, and I love that as a concept. I love the idea that I can just go, here you go, here's the IDE source code if you want to go modify it. My point is that if we could get more of the tools that make up PlayBASIC to be written in PB, or at least have a large percentage of themselves written in PB, that gives us options. That gives not just me options, gives you guys options to do things. And as we change APIs, we can have something that runs entirely modern, straight out of the box. If you want to have a completely visual IDE, that graphical IDE running on the latest interface, whatever that would be, whether it's the way the rendering in here works, or the way the document stuff works, is that it takes care of the document in the background, and you just have to render the loop. It's just a loop, really. Like I'll show you. Sorry. And this is the render loop. We've just got a stepping through of this of the list of tokens. I'm actually grabbing the string every time we do that. I probably shouldn't do that at all. And then we work out what the color is, just by a select case. Obviously, you can make most of those cases you can make into a table, so it wouldn't even need the select case. Some of them you couldn't, because you've got a bit of logic happening here or there, but it's not the end of the world. This is just the thing to toggle the collapse of the function before. So we're displaying array names in their own palette. types in their own palette, something else, whatever. But it just falls through. If you find an end of line, we've got a bit of logic to handle what we're doing on the next line. It cleans the next row out and then starts drawing text over top of it. So it's only drawing rows of that we're drawing over. Just a small optimization, but not really necessary. And the last bit here is just the rendering of the draw text. And that's the whole loop. Now that could be in anything. All what really matters here is that we have the vertical scroll element, and then we have some sort of information about having the cursor, and we render whatever font we want. Something to think about. I've been kind of obsessing over this for the last probably month. Actually, I thought a lot about it, and I really think this is the way to go, because it means that if we have all we need is a basic surface to render onto, as long as we can render text to that surface and do some simple filling of the background, we could port the IDE to anything. I mean anything. That's future though. Let's focus on the present. I'll leave that with you. Have fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye.